been concerned about environmental issues for a long time in the city. In fact, when Mayor Cote was a city councillor, he was actually going to initiate our Environment Advisory Committee and about a 50-point plan of the environment. Well, climate change hasn't gotten any better. If you've seen the news in Australia, you have an idea that there's some long-term impacts that are happening around our planet that we're dealing with. And in fact, cities are dealing with them. And a lot of people don't realize this, but we're having in Metro Vancouver to plan for things like greater tidal action, increased flooding on the Fraser River, what it might mean to have longer, drier summers and still have water in the pipes. So in the day-to-day business of cities, we're actually managing climate change now and trying to figure out how to deal with that. So we adopted some 7 steps based on climate change specifically that we wanted, and we want to make it real. A lot of cities have adopted climate targets and been missing them, sort of idealized visions, and we concluded adopting climate targets for GHG emissions without actually providing the resources or having a plan is not actually going to work, right? So we looked at some of that. So here's our targets, if you're interested. 45% reduction by 2030, 65% reduction by 2040, and 100% by 2050. That means that we want the corporation of the City of New Westminster, all of our fleet, all of our buildings to be 100% free of harmful emissions. We also adopted a strategic plan this year with a vision. And that vision is a vibrant, compassionate, sustainable city that includes everyone. So what we're working on right now, and what you can be a part of, is we're doing the Climate Action Budgeting Framework. We're going to prioritize climate emergency actions in the work plans of city staff and departments. We're going to prioritize climate emergency initiatives in the 5-year financial plan. We're going to embed carbon pricing into our decision making. We're going to figure out how much pollution we're causing in every decision we take. We buy a new fire truck, what does that do to the environment? So every decision we take where we spend money, we'll be looking at what kind of environmental impact it has. We're going to strive for affordability, equity, and livability. That relates directly to climate change in that a lot of the older housing we have in New Westminster is not climate friendly, including the housing owned by Metro Vancouver. So we have some very large housing complexes here. They leak like a sieve when it comes to heat and energy. Implement climate action levy on electric utility bills. I thought that's the most popular one. So what does it mean to have a carbon-free corporation? Well, we're going to reduce our overall carbon footprint and strive to achieve net zero emissions by 2030. What does it mean to have a car-light community? We'll be initiating a public process around that. You may have heard some rumors. You know, there's a group campaigning for Columbia Street to be car-free. We're not going to do anything without public consultation, and I hope we get a lot of input when we initiate that process. You'll see it in the newspaper, you'll see it online. You might even get a letter in your mailbox that we're looking at how to do that. But if you walk around even the downtown area, you yourself have seen some 60-foot wide streets. The city was built to be a capital. It never got to be a capital, but it was built with street widths and blocks to serve a capital. That's how we got Royal Avenue. Royal Avenue is as wide as it is because it was anticipated it would be the grand boulevard of the capital of British Columbia. So we actually have a lot of roads. If you walk around downtown, you'll see where we have a wide street that runs past the church for only 1 block. And then just a few feet over is the next street. So there might actually be a lot of potential to reduce some of the space that's being occupied by tarmac in our community. Carbon-free homes and buildings. We've actually adopted something called the STEP code. We're going to adopt other criteria for buildings that happen in the community. So to reduce carbon emissions for all homes and buildings will be reduced significantly. That's our goal. By 2030, all new replacement heating and hot water systems will be zero emissions. And of course, I need that for new buildings. Pollution-free vehicles. By 2030, 50% of kilometers driven by New Westminster registered vehicle owners will be zero emissions vehicles. Does 50% sound like a lot? Well, the province actually has a higher target than that. And when we see electric cars coming in, and we see more people not using cars, we've already achieved some pretty significant targets. For example, people who shop in the uptown area, 50% of the people who shop in the uptown area arrive on foot or by transit or cycle. New Westminster actually has one of the highest ratios. We do have a little problem. We have 450,000 vehicles that travel through our community every day. Anyone want to guess how many commuter trips are generated by New Westminster residents? Take a guess. Go ahead. New Westminster residents generate 22,000 commuter trips a day. We host 450,000. So we're really looking at our own residents, and we're looking at the fleet of vehicles that's owned by the city. But of course, we need our provincial and federal partners to really be there to step up to help have the cleanest possible air that we can in the city of New Westminster. We adopted an urban forest program a couple of years ago. We started with simply thinking about a tree bylaw, but we wanted to look at it more holistically in the context of the environment. So we realized that New Westminster actually has less tree canopy coverage than surrounding communities do. And if you look at Google Maps, you can see this quite easily for yourself. You can see where there's lots of trees and where there's not a lot of trees. So our goal is to have an urban forest canopy coverage at 27% of the community by 2030. And we've already adopted a tree planting program. We're going to have a tree buying program. Now, I know a lot of you can't plant a tree. I live in a townhouse on Ginger Drive in a multifamily, so I have a ground floor deck, so I'm lucky. I can plant a tree if I want to, but my strata would require it be in a container. We are going to have a tree sale program. It'll be launched on February 14th. It'll be on the city website. If you're interested in buying a tree or even having some in front of your strata building, you can go on the website February 14th or afterwards and buy a tree. And we're going to have a tree sale every year. And the trees will be available for pickup on March 14th. We're also launching an Adopt a Tree program at the same time. So if you have a tree in front of your building and you would like to be the one to take care of the watering in the summer and report any problems with the tree, we'll be launching that on February 14th too. We want to have a quality, people-centered public realm. So what does that mean? Well, we want a minimum of 10% of today's street space that currently only serves motor vehicles, excluding transit, will be reallocated for sustainable transportation or public gathering by 2030. The natural environment will be integrated with the public realm. So these are our ambitions at this time related to climate change. Our next step is how that will be reflected in the city budget. We've just completed some online budget consultation, but that doesn't mean you can't talk to me or talk to anyone in the city that you want to. I'd be glad to hear from you. The last thing I want to say tonight is that this is the first meeting where I've been assigned as your council liaison. We decided to appoint councillors to every residents association to be a liaison, so if you ever have anything you want to say, and I'll tell you, I have a thick skin. I'm not a politician who gets defensive. If you have a criticism of the city too, that's fine. But if you ever want to have a chat, I'm at the key all the time. I'm available for a cup of coffee. So I'm pretty accessible, and I'd be glad to hear from anybody. Thank you very much.